Hello, everybody. We're just going to wait for more people to join. And I don't know if we can pull up some slides. In the meantime, there they are. Perfect. All right, so welcome back, everybody. It's good to see familiar names in the audience and some new people. I'm Cudkowicz, the sponsor of the platform trial, and I'm here with Catherine Small and Allison Bulat. It's a small group this week. Sabrina Paganoni is on vacation. I wanted to give you an update on the status of the platform trial and then have some time for Q&A. So as many of you know, this is a big initiative to try to test drugs more efficiently and rapidly in ALS so we can bring the best drugs forward. And it's really a collaborative effort by many groups that work together, but also many funding foundations listed here on the right and many companies that were working together. It's really a global effort to try to improve and accelerate how we develop treatments in ALS. Next slide, please. So for those of you who are new, the idea of a platform trial is to test more than one drug at the same time and share the infrastructure and share the data from people who get the placebo during the 24-week double-blind period so that we can minimize the number there. So people come into the study, they're randomized into one of the active drugs. And right now we have two, Calico, one by Calico and one by Denali, what we call Regimen F and G. Then there's a second randomization that 75% of people get the active drug, 25% placebo for 24 weeks. And then after that 24-week period, everybody gets the active drug until we know the results of the trial. We started this in 2020. We finished the first 4 regimens, A through D, and reported those out. We're still doing analyses on biomarkers and the open label extension period there. And writing up some of those papers, and 2 of those drugs are going forward, hopefully to phase 3 testing. We're done with enrollment for Regimen E and expecting the results this fall. And then we are actively enrolling F&G, and we are talking to other companies for H and I and J maybe. Next slide, please. So just going to give you updates for the active enrolling trials, and this is enrolling very well. So thank you to people on the call who have been looking into being part of this or are part of it. There's 234 participants who have come in and provided consent to be screened for it, of which 179 currently have been assigned either to Regimen F or G, and 142 have already started treatment. There's always a little lag between each of these groups. Our goal is approximately 240 people per regimen. So we're well on our way, but there's lots of slots and lots of sites enrolling, and we really the sooner we can finish enrollment, the sooner that we're going to get results on these 2 drugs. Next slide, please. So these are the sites that are activated. There's 59 that are located throughout the U.S. We have, I'd say we'll probably get up to 66 or 67. We have 72 sites in our network, but not all of them can do all of the studies. You know, maybe it's because of their staffing or their current situation, but I think we'll probably get to 66 or 67. Next slide, please. So if you want to know if a site near you is active, you can, there's a couple ways you can do it. We have this on our website, which we can put the link in the chat as well. You can look up a site and it'll say whether it's actively recruiting or not. You can also reach out to Catherine Small, who's here on the call, and she can help you find a site near you and answer any questions about the platform trial. Next slide, please. We did recently, maybe 2 weeks ago, have Denali or Regimen G come and give their science webinar. Earlier, a couple months earlier, we've done the same for Regimen F. They're both on our website, and you can find it either with the fancy QR code or the link there. These are really good, kind of brief summaries of the science and the rationale and why we were excited about having these 2 drugs, join our platform, and then the Q&A also, which was quite good for both the Denali and the Calico webinars. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, you can reach out anytime to Catherine Small or Allison Bullock with questions about the platform trial and the sites, and I'm sure any other question you want to ask. They also know about other clinical trials. We have a couple upcoming webinars in August that we think will be of interest. August 10th, we're going to, someone who's had a spinal tap to donate spinal fluid for biomarker research and for the clinical trial is going to give a little their perspective on it. And the week after, we're invited someone who's well known to many of you, Gwen Pearson, to speak as really an advocate for research who's living with ALS. And then the week after, we'll go back to our regular Q&A webinar. And then I think most people take that last week off before Labor Day, so we won't have an August 31st webinar. Next slide, please. That's it. So just short updates. So hopefully plenty of time for any questions from the attendees. And I think Catherine is going to read them.
Yeah, sure. And I actually don't see any questions that have come in the chat, but we got a couple ahead of time. So we'll start there. And Allison actually intercepted this question prior to the webinar. So somebody was asking for clarification about how many participants we expect to enroll in each regimen, and then when we expect those regimens to be all the way enrolled.
So it's approximately 240 participants. It might be a little more for one or the other, but that's approximately the number. We did increase the sample size from the first 4 regimens. So A through D were 160 each, and we did that because of the change in standard of care. So it's a good reason to have to do it with Relyvrio coming on the market and having a slowing disease progression. We wanted to make sure that we still had enough participants in the study and the power of the design of the study to tell if a new drug was effective, while allowing, of course, people to be on standard of care. So because of that change, we went from 160 to about 240 per regimen.
This is a related question that I got via email this week. So somebody was asking about the 3-to-1 active to placebo ratio, and in light of us, previously when we were enrolling 160 per regimen, it was 120 approximately active versus 40 assigned to placebo. Is it still that 3-to-1 ratio?
Yes, it's still, yeah, it's a good question. It's still a 3-to-1 ratio for each of the regimens. And I think I forgot to answer the question when we think we'll be done with enrollment, and we're just doing those projections. It's hard to tell. I hope that the more people enroll, the faster. But I hope in early 2024, maybe sooner. It really will depend on. Right now it's enrolling really well, and I thank people for doing that. We sometimes see then August a little less as people go on holidays and stuff. But I don't know if Catherine is frozen in a very nice smile. Say it again. Okay. Catherine, I think we can't hear you. So maybe I don't know, Allison, if you see any good questions.
Yeah, I can jump in until we get Catherine back. Another question that came in ahead of time was if there's any more data available on the first regimen, such as like post hoc analysis data or any subgroup data.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Yeah, we have finished all the analyses on A through D and all the different subgroups. And we have shared everything we have publicly. Regimen D, I think, was the one where we did see, we saw benefit in everybody on our speech app, but we saw some more benefit on function and neurofilament in subgroups of people who are progressing faster. And I don't think that means that the drug only works in people who are faster, but I do think it means in a 6-month study, we're really learning that it's easier to see a signal of efficacy in people who are, unfortunately, progressing faster. And that's an important trial thing. But we're working, we have 4 writing groups going at the same time and really trying to get the full papers out for A through D so that we can get all the data and all the tables out there in the public. And we'll make sure that those are all free download papers so that they can be accessed by anybody.
Awesome. Catherine, are you back on with us?
I'll give it a whirl, but we can tag team it if we need to. There's a question in the chat about whether we've had discussions with Calico, so Calico for Regimen F and or Denali for Regimen G about expanded access.
Yes, we have. And we ask all the pharma partners that want to join the platform trial about this from day one. So and I don't have an answer for you though yet. Obviously, we're still discussing it and what that might look like and the timing. And we'll definitely bring them both back here to answer that question directly to you. But so we definitely talking about it, but I don't have a commitment from either yet. So but hopefully that will change. So more to come on that.
Yeah, and we'll definitely announce in advance the next time that we have representatives from those companies on this call to answer those types of questions.
Yeah, probably later in the fall. I think we'll have them come back.
Yeah, I think that's what we're aiming for. But yeah, the exact date is to be determined. Somebody here was recently diagnosed and they live in Oklahoma. They're asking, they're kind of naive to the whole trial participation process and what that looks like. What are the steps that somebody should take to get in on a trial?
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. So I'd say first thing up is hopefully you're at an ALS center where you can talk to the physicians there about what options are out there, both standard of care to get on that, the drugs that are out there, and also what trials are out there. If they don't know, and they might not, there are some resources. So two of the great resources are on this call, Catherine Small and Allison Boulat, but also IMALS has a clinical trial group that helps with navigation for choosing trials. There's a federal website, clinicaltrial.gov, that lists it, but I always say it's like a good problem to have. A couple of years ago, we only had maybe one trial to offer. Now there's so many that it really takes time and a team that you trust to discuss, what's best for you and go through the different options. And often it's best your neurologist or somebody that knows you and sees you. But if you don't have someone like that, then there are these more central opportunities and options for people.
Yeah, and I'll ask Allison. I think that person might have joined the call after we put the patient navigator contact info in the chat. So if you're able to plug that again, if you wanted to talk about the platform trial specifically, you're welcome to reach out to us via phone or email too. Somebody is saying that they're having trouble accessing past webinars, so I can help out on the back end too. I'll follow up via email, but could you briefly summarize the science for Regimen F and Regimen G?
Oh, sure. So they both work on this similar target or mechanism of action, which is called the integrated stress response. So when cells, motor neurons in particular, but all cells really, when they're injured or under some type of stress, they have a whole system that gets turned on, which is trying to save the cell initially. It shuts down protein production and tries to kind of calm down activity in the cell. But that is usually short-lived. But in people with ALS, that system stays on chronically. And so it's called a chronic integrated stress response. And that's not good for cells. So when that happens, this protein called TDP-43 gets mislocated into the wrong part of the cell. It aggregates, and then it causes a whole series of downstream events that lead to the motor neurons being injured and eventually dying. So both Calico and Denali, their drugs work on that integrated stress response by blocking that chronic activation. And the thought behind that is if you can block that chronic activation, you can get rid of the TDP-43 protein aggregates. You can help the TDP-43 go in the right place of the cell And we know that's a really important target in ALS. And so we're, that was why we were excited to partner with both of them to test their drugs in the platform trial. But we'll make sure that you can get to the videos, which have nice pictures and probably much clearer.
Yeah, I think I can send them to whichever email you put in when you signed onto this webinar. So I'll send you an email after this, just giving those links directly. There are a few questions that are pertaining to Regimen E. So I'll kind of lump them together here. So what is our timeline for when we expect the last visit for the last person enrolled in Regimen E? Could you repeat when we expect the top line results, or just a general update on where we are with Regimen E?
Yeah, so Regimen E is fully enrolled and in what we call the active phase. And we expect last patient, last visit sometime in August or early September, so very soon. And it can take, 8 to 12 weeks, or sometimes 16 weeks from that last day. It really depends on the speed of getting all the last data in and cleaned, and there's some complicated things that have to be done to the data set to make it FDA compliant, and then it's analyzed. But we're not far, so I don't have an exact date for you, but it's what we're all working on. Is kind of getting ready for database lock and starting the analyses.
And I see there's a follow-up question here in the chat from the person from Oklahoma who's looking into getting into research. Just kind of asking for clarification about what are the first steps. And I'm happy to talk offline about this, but just for anybody who's watching and wondering what that initial conversation looks like. Usually, if you decide to connect and reach out to Patient Navigator, I usually recommend, first seeing the eligibility criteria. It's listed online, but just doing a quick overview of that to see if you or your loved one might be eligible to participate based on some of the top criteria. And then if that checks out and looks good, the next step would be connecting with one or more local research centers that are easy to commute to, and having that conversation at the site level, talking to them, kind of combing through in more detail your specific medical history and if that aligns with the eligibility criteria. At that level, if that checks out, they'll probably try to set up an in-person screening visit. And that would be kind of the last stage toward getting involved in a trial to see whether somebody might be eligible to enroll. So it can take, a couple weeks to get that conversation rolling and get connected with a site, but it really is just as simple as, checking the eligibility criteria and finding a site near you. But again, we can talk offline if you have more questions. Another question in the chat is related to biomarkers. So do we have quantitative biomarker data and specifically related to NFL?
Yeah, so we now we run NFL on all our studies, starting from Regimen A. We have reported out the results from Regimen C and D, and reported out they're in press releases that the companies have issued. But we haven't yet finished our work on A and B. We focused on C and D first because they had some positive clinical effects. So there were some decreases in neurofilament in both Regimen C and D. The field, it's such an important new biomarker. We know from the gene therapy approval of tofersen that when you shut down the cause of the illness, that you could lower the neurofilament 50% in 12 weeks, and then they saw clinical benefit, a couple months later. So it was a good predictor. What we don't know is if, let's say, you have a drug that's not quite on the exact cause of the illness, but a little more downstream, and it lowers it 10%, 20%, what does that mean clinically? And that's what the field is learning now. We also know that some drugs on the market, like Riluzole, Radicava, Relyvrio, don't change neurofilament, at least in 6-month period. So it's really important to know that if a drug doesn't lower neurofilament, it doesn't mean that it doesn't work clinically. But obviously, if it does lower it a lot, that's a really good thing. So we definitely need to develop more biomarkers. And so the other thing the platform trial is doing is sending the samples for other biomarkers, like we've sent urine for P75, which is a marker of cell death, and we're waiting for those results. And we've sent it out to some other scientists to look for new biomarkers. There
are a couple of people asking about getting involved in the trial. So is it too late to sign up for the HEALEY Platform Trial? And if not, what are the wait times for initial processing to get into the trial?
It's not too late. So we're definitely looking for a couple hundred more people for Regimen F and G, and we're also working on the next two regimens, hopefully next three. Yes, now it depends where you live. So some sites could take a new referral, next week, and other ones, maybe some of the smaller ones, might need to wait a month or so. But this is where you're really reaching out to Catherine, who can connect you with the sites and also knows which sites might have more availability to move faster. So we're happy to help on that.
So yeah, it can vary site from site. And I think once you get involved at the site level, it's pretty standard from there. So I don't know if you want to clarify when somebody, has their screening visit, what does the timeline look like between screening for the trial and that baseline first study visit?
Oh yeah. So the time from when you first come in and you get the first dose is anywhere probably between 1 week would be the fastest, and then 42 days is the longest. So we allow 42 days because a few things have to happen, like lab tests, a spinal tap, and some assessments. But it can be done fast if you have availability and the site has availability to do it sooner. But the maximum is 42 days.
And as always, there's a lot of forward thinkers in attendance today. So there's a couple questions about future directions. One person is saying, it seems like a lot of trials aim to slow progression. Are there any in the future that would restore function? Is that a realistic possibility?
Yeah, I do think it's a realistic possibility. And I want to explain that we designed the trials to pick up at least a certain amount of slowing. So, for example, we picked 30%. We want the drugs we treat to at least do 30%. But that doesn't mean they couldn't do 50% or they couldn't, stop it. But we, and this is really based on talking to people with the illness and talking to physicians, that is kind of the minimum that would be, worth having a drug for. Now, it could be that if a drug really works, that you will see people, stop and get better. But it's hard to say that up front until we've actually tested it. I think the best example, again, is the gene therapy trial for SOD1 ALS. That study was designed to slow the progression, but they found, especially in the active phase of the trial, about some people getting better, some slowing progression, then getting better. But it was actually powered and designed to look for slowing. So I hope that made sense. I do think as the closer you get to the cause of the illness, you're targeting that drug, and you can significantly slow the illness down, eventually you have the natural ability to recover function. So that was there were many exciting things about that study, but being able to see people have return to function was super exciting. It tells us it's very possible if you can really get at the upstream cause of the biology.
Has the platform trial team had any thoughts about combining two regimens, even if individually they were not successful?
Yeah, that's a really good scientific question. We haven't yet done that. But that is how platform trials work. But they typically take the ones that are successful and then combine them with the other ones that are successful. I think before we took two drugs that didn't work and combined them, we would want some preclinical data suggesting that they'd be additive. But as far as I know, that hasn't yet been done with, for example, regimens A and B. But you'd want that, some proof that they're better together than separate before you put them together in people.
Someone is asking a question related to Dr. Bob Brown's genetic research, and they're asking whether there are any medications for C9 ALS.
Yeah, we should have Dr. Brown come here and he can tell about his work, his gene therapy work in C9 as well as SOD1. I think people want to figure out a gene therapy for C9, but it's turned out to be much more complicated than SOD1. It's a more complicated gene mutation. And the first two attempts at this by Biogen and Wave Therapeutics didn't work. But that doesn't mean that people aren't going to try, including Dr. Brown was working on it, as well as several companies using other approaches to try to tackle that. There's also a lot of smaller companies are working on small molecule approaches for C9. So I sometimes say that I think we need a C9 platform trial alone, just because of the sheer number of therapies that are going to be coming forward for testing in that illness, which is, you know, a rare form of a rare disease. So it really does lend itself to this platform trial approach.
While we're on the topic of the drug development pipeline, someone's asking whether the FDA has formally changed their process for approving and or allowing access to new drugs.
I think they, it's a good question. I don't think they've changed their processes, but they've always had the ability to be flexible and have single study approval. But I think they've implemented them in ALS for the last 3 drugs, really, including Radicava, that was approved on a single study in another country, then Relyvrio, and then Tofersen, which was an accelerated approval. So they've shown a lot of flexibility, and other countries have not. I mean, Relyvrio and Radicava are not available yet in Europe. They are in Canada. The gene therapy is not yet available in other countries. So they have moved fast on approvals, and we should be grateful for that. Is there more they can do? Obviously, yes, but I think they have been more flexible.
We had another biomarker question come in. This one's asking about Treg cells. Is that a new biomarker, and what does it tell us?
Yeah, so Dr. Stanapel done a lot of work on these T regulatory cells. So these are T cells that usually keep your inflammation down in your body. And he's shown that in people with ALS, the number of Treg cells goes down, and that they stop functioning as well as they should. And that's associated with clinical progression. So there aren't any easy biomarkers for Tregs, but there are certainly research lab approaches to measuring Treg function. And we have a partnership here with a lab that can do that on our patients that we see at Mass General. It's a research study, and Dr. Appel does, and a few others, but there's not yet a commercial or easy way to do it. So we can certainly do it in clinical trials and do it in a clinical research setting, but it's not yet widely available.
I think we have one last question. So hopping back to the topic of FDA approval, do you have an update on where Neuron stands in terms of FDA approval with that study drug?
Oh, so Neuron, for those people, if there is anyone who doesn't know about Neuron is from company Brainstorm, and they finished a phase 3 trial, and they are now under FDA review. There is an FDA advisory committee meeting, I think September 27th. And that's when the FDA asks independent advisors to answer some questions or give their input on the data. So that'll be the next information I think we have on Neuron from Brainstorm.
And I think that wraps up the Q&A portion. So Merritt, I'll hand it back over to you for final comments tonight.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. It's really great to see you regularly, and please spread the word about the webinars to other people, and look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you, Allison and Catherine.